Hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. It's just gone 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to give everyone a chance to join. While we're waiting, do feel free to drop into the Q&A box and say hi. We've disabled the chat feature as we've discovered it can cause problems for some people using screen readers. So I'm just going to leave it a few moments for a few more people to arrive, and then we'll get started. So I can see a lot more of you have joined now, so I'm going to officially start the webinar now. So hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is how to do inclusive, accessible recruitment. My name is Annie Mannion, and I'm Digital Communications Manager at AbilityNet, and I'll be running you through what you can expect from today's session. So just to go through a few bits of housekeeping. The session is being recorded. We've got live captions being provided by MyClearText. So thank you, Claire, who's doing those in the background. You can turn on the captions using the closed caption option on the control panel. And there are also additional live captions via streamtext.net. Slides are available at slideshare.net/AbilityNet and also on our website at abilitynet.org.uk/accessible-recruitment. And if you have any technical issues or you need to leave early, don't worry, you'll receive an email with the recording, the transcript and the slides, and that will be on Thursday afternoon that you'll receive that. And then depending on how you joined the webinar, you'll find a Q&A window. So if you want to ask the speakers any questions, do drop those in the Q&A area for us to address later on. And you'll also be presented with a feedback form at the end of the session. So we'd really appreciate it if you could take a couple of minutes to complete this. So for those of you who aren't yet familiar with AbilityNet, we support people of any age living with any disability or impairment to use technology to achieve their goals at home, at work and in education. And we do this by providing specialist advice, services, free information resources, and like this webinar. And I'll share a little more about our services at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please, Adam. Thank you. So today's session, we welcome Michael Vermeersch, who is Digital Inclusion Lead at Microsoft. And he'll be chatting later on with Amy Lowe, who is Service Delivery Director at AbilityNet, and about how Microsoft approaches inclusive, accessible recruitment best practices. And then we're also joined by Mairead Comerford, who's Head of HR at AbilityNet, and she'll be sharing how to avoid unconscious bias in the recruitment process and how we've also achieved disability confident leader status. So just before we kick off today's webinar content, I'm just going to start with a poll. So I'm just going to launch that now. Okay, so can you tell us how confident are you that your organisation, if applicable, is doing recruitment in an inclusive, accessible way? Are you very confident? We have fully inclusive, accessible policies and procedures. Quite confident. There may be some things that we could do better, but generally we get things right. Not very confident. We still have a lot to learn and implement. Not at all confident. My organisation needs to make major improvements. Or not applicable, I don't belong to an organisation. Depending on how you've joined the webinar, you may find you can't see the poll, but you can respond in the Q&A panel. So I'll just leave a few more moments for everybody to respond. Okay, and I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. So you can see that we've got 8% of you are very confident. We have fully inclusive, accessible policies and procedures. Then 47%, which is the largest percentage of you, are quite confident. There may be some things we could do better, but generally we get things right. 38% of you are not very confident. We still have a lot to learn. 3% not at all confident. My organisation needs to make major improvements. And then there are 4% who don't belong to an organisation. Okay, so Mairead and Amy will delve into what those results indicate a little more in their session. So over to you both, Amy and Mairead.
Thanks, Annie. So good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you all here and good to see a range of responses in the poll. So hopefully there'll be some interesting takeaways for everybody that's attending. And please do use the Q&A box to share any of your own ideas and best practices throughout the session. That'd be really interesting for everybody. So for anyone who can't see it, on the first slide, we've got a word cloud that shows a range of words relating to a feeling of belonging and inclusion, which is a key theme for today's webinar. And we're going to kick off with a bit of a visualization exercise to get us warmed up. So if you feel comfortable to do so, close your eyes and think about a time when you were applying for a role and you had that moment. Maybe it was when you were looking at the job advert, visiting the company website, maybe when you were reading through the application pack or meeting with the interview panel, when you had that big click moment of this is a role and a place of work where I could truly belong and be my authentic self. So some people might have been able to recall many moments like that. Others might have found it a bit more difficult to pull an example to mind. Some people might not recall developing a sense of belonging until they've been in a role for a while, and that's probably to be expected. And some people may feel that they've not had that at all so far in their career, and that would really be a great shame. Engendering that feeling is something that's really important for organisations in building a strong, diverse and inclusive team. And that should start right at the very beginning with the recruitment process. So now think about a time when you were looking at a job opportunity and you felt the opposite way and took yourself out of the process. And this might have been at the point of clicking into the job ad, reading through the application pack, upon invitation to first or second interview, or maybe in the middle of an interview. And sometimes it relates to things like the ethos of the company, an attitude someone's expressed, or something connected to the role. But sometimes it could be due to something quite mundane or practical, like the interviews are being held at a far off location, or the job isn't flexible, or the application process is lengthy. And it might be that people are able to recall more of these moments compared with the first example. And I think that's something we all want to try and avoid when we're recruiting. So Mairead and I are going to now look at the recruitment process and discuss what's going to be important if you want to be able to create that positive click feeling for the broadest possible audience. And how can we make that sense of welcome and belonging explicit to all groups, including disabled candidates? So on the slide here, we've got some definitions of belonging, and we thought it would be useful to check out some dictionary definitions. And here's a selection I'll read out to you now. So to be in the right place or a suitable place, to feel happy or comfortable in a situation or group, feeling like an important member of a group, or the sense of truly fitting or meshing. And maybe it's just me, but even reading out those definitions makes me feel pretty good. And I think as organisations, we should be aspiring to create that feeling for applicants from their very first interaction with us. And it's important to say here that contrary to what's becoming quite an outdated notion of cultural fit, you really shouldn't have to assimilate or be like everyone else to feel a sense of belonging. But what you do need is to feel that you occupy a respected place and have a voice. And quite often this is much less about the candidate and much more about the maturity of the organisation and their realisation that welcoming diversity is a truly positive step. But we'll come on to that in a bit more detail later. And then Mairead and I were talking about what's the opposite of belonging, and there's an antonym which it might be a relatively new term for many of us, the notion of othering, and it's quite useful in its universal application and relatability. So similarly to when you felt a strong sense of belonging, most of us can recall a time when we felt excluded or defined as being different, and the discomfort around that. So we found some dictionary definitions for othering as well, which were, they suggest intolerance and exclusion. Individuals or groups are defined and labelled as not fitting the norm or having negative characteristics that are attributed to groups or people. And actually, othering is really a synonym of discrimination. So knowing what discrimination is and how easily it can occur is really important for all participants in the recruitment process. And that includes applicants, interviewers, and people in marketing roles that are marketing positions. So just going on to the next slide, Mairead, could we go through types of disability discrimination and just give a few examples?
Yeah, so I'll just go through a few with you. Direct discrimination in recruitment exists where individuals with a particular protected characteristic are excluded from applying or not even selected on the basis of that characteristic. So an example of that could be someone having the skill set required for the role, but having their application rejected once they declare they have a disability. So that's direct discrimination. And you can see from some stats there that the Leonard Cheshire report, in that 17% of applicants that applied for a job in the last 5 years have had a job offer withdrawn as a result of their disability, which is very worrying. Indirect discrimination describes situations which occur when an employer puts in place a particular provision or criterion or practice which appears to treat everyone equally, but which in practice leads to people from a particular protected group being treated less favourably than others. So an example of that could be that you sometimes see that a driving licence or being able to drive is required, even though it's not needed for the job. And if you think of somebody with a visual disability, visual impairment, why couldn't they use public transport or even a taxi service to get to work or get to client sites? If we go on to the next slide, we can look at harassment and then reasonable adjustments, putting those in place. So harassment defined by the law is unwanted conduct, which is related to a relevant protected characteristic. So it can include behaviour that individuals find offensive, even if it's not directed at them, and even if they don't have that relevant protected characteristic themselves. So, for example, you could be at a job interview and an offensive remark is made about a particular, it could be a religious group, race. And even though the candidate is not a member of that group or race, they could see that as harassment.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So reasonable adjustments. So the Equality Act places a duty on all of us as employers to make reasonable adjustments for disabled candidates at all stages of the recruitment process. And this really is to remove the barriers faced by the disability. So the individual can work and apply for jobs in the same way as someone without that disability. And if you look at the stats there, 66% cited, 1 in 2 disabled people experience disability-related bullying and harassment at work. So if we look at reasonable adjustments, I think people always think that this is quite a costly thing to do and they worry about it, but that's having low awareness of how low cost reasonable adjustments can be. And this is a real missed opportunity, as putting adjustments in place is mostly very low cost and straightforward to achieve. At AbilityNet, we regularly use Access to Work, the government's Access to Work scheme, which is really good. It covers the cost of assistive technology that needs to be put in place. It could be something like some software for dyslexic, or it could be someone who needs who has a mental illness and needs some support through that. So I would recommend everybody looking into that. You can't apply for it for yourself. It's the person who you employ, you've made the job offer to, needs to apply for that. So if we go on to the next slide.
Yeah, so how do you reduce the likelihood of discrimination or bias in your hiring process specifically?
Well, I come on to it in a bit. It's something that we do from very early on, really. We look at things like interview questions. We look at, from the beginning, we look at job descriptions and what we're asking for, and making sure that we're not just asking the nice to haves, really, that what is required for that particular job. And I think what comes up quite frequently is people saying it has to be a 9 to 5, 5 days a week job. When you think that the people you might be excluding from that, especially working mums, for instance, or people you know who are having a change in career and want to reduce their hours of working, could that job be done in condensed hours? Could it be done in 4 days a week, 35 hours, or could it be done 4 days, 28 hours? You know, so having a more flexible approach will allow for you to have a wider applicants, a wider amount of people applying. So we take that into account, and we're always reviewing our recruitment process, always. So if something doesn't work, then we will look to change it.
Yeah, try and sort of design out non-inclusive practices so that, and I think maybe in some larger organisations that's really important. And on unconscious bias, because that's something that's sort of been talked about quite a lot in recent years.
Yeah, it's very much the kind of in thing, isn't it? Unconscious bias. And I saw something in the paper the other day about having a go at charities spending so much money on unconscious bias, with people spending £9,000 plus on the training. And really that does not need to be the case. I think we had one just before Christmas for all our staff and our volunteers, and it came in at about less than £20 per person. And it was one of the most, it was well attended, but the feedback we got from staff and volunteers was very positive, because it's understanding that we've probably all got a bit of unconscious bias in us somewhere, and looking out for that and challenging yourself when you see it.
I think you're right, because I read something that said actually the people who consider themselves to have the least biases can often be unconsciously having those. So actually perhaps people working in places like AbilityNet, it's very useful to consider that, definitely. Yes. Okay. So just moving on to the next slide. So just wanted to talk to you a little bit about going on around designing inclusive practices. AbilityNet have created employee inclusion gap analysis, which is designed to take people through the org through a range of questions and have them provide their experience as employees or managers, focusing in on each stage from the job ad, the application process, pre-interview, interview and job offer. And then there's other sections in the gap analysis that relate to onboarding and ways of working and the whole employee journey, but we'll pick those ones up in future webinars that we've got planned for later in the year. So we don't have time to go through all the recruitment focused questions today, but we were just going to have a quick interactive session now with the audience where we pick a few of the questions and poll the audience to get a feel for where we are with those sorts of inclusive by design considerations. If we could quickly go to the next slide. So for each step in the employee journey, we're looking for gaps or concerns that might lead to candidates declining to continue. So let's start with a candidate faced with a job ad. What could they feel might make them decline to continue at that stage? And some of them might be they don't understand the requirements of the job description, they might not think they're a fit for the role, or that they've got the right qualifications. So if we just go to our first interactive poll in this section on the next slide. So Annie, over to you.
Okay, so on your organisation's job adverts and job descriptions, do you focus on essential requirements only for the role? So in terms of the answers, you've got yes, no, not consistently, don't know, or not applicable.
And this is what Mairead was saying earlier about avoiding packing a job description with nice to haves that might not relate to the key criteria for the role.
So I can see just over half of you have voted, so I'll leave it a few more moments for everybody to vote.
A good example of that, Amy, that was just talking about is when people put in things like excellent communication skills or good team player, and they're often just included as default skills, really, even if they're not necessary. People feel that it's something you have to put into a job description. But, you know, we work a lot with experts, and when speaking to the Autistic Society, autistic people will not apply for jobs demanding these attributes. And that means that you're missing out on suitable applicants that may be really good for the role that you're putting up. So don't put them there just because you think they ought to be there. You know, really challenge your job descriptions.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. You miss out on some fantastic talent.
Yeah.
So just sharing the results, for yes, we have 31%, no, 28%, not consistently 22%, 13% don't know, and then 6% is not applicable.
Interesting. So might be something for some people to consider. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to the application process and some sort of concerns that a candidate might have at which point they may decide not to continue applying. Could be that the application process is daunting, that they're worried they'll be judged on gaps in their work experience. Maybe they've got some questions, but they don't want to look silly. And, you know, maybe they don't know what to write about or how much to write in the application form or cover letter. So we're just going to poll on one of the gap analysis questions. So Annie?
Yeah, so the next poll is, in your organisation's job application process, do you signpost help with completing an application form or cover letter if required? So is that yes, you do, no, you don't, not consistently, you're not sure, you don't know, or not applicable?
So whilst people are voting on that one, Mairead, what's the advantage of being clear that you're signposting, that people can ask for help with the application process?
Yeah, so really it's about normalising the notion of asking for help with the form or clarifying any questions they might have. But people can often feel that they will be judged for asking for support with the application process. But any sensible employer should welcome this, as it gives the candidate a better chance of meeting that criteria. So if someone needs support with the application form, you might learn something about it, perhaps not being very accessible process to follow. It might be too long and it might be daunting. So getting that feedback is really useful for you to develop your recruitment process going forward, really.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay.
So sharing the results, we've got 24% say yes, they do signpost help with completing an application form or cover letter if required. 34% say no, 12% not consistently, 25% don't know, and 5% not applicable.
So again, that might be a worthwhile thing to consider in the future. So shall we whiz through this next one? Sorry, I don't want to run over time. Yeah. So pre-interview. If we just go straight to the poll on pre-interview, and the question we're going to ask here is, sorry, you're going to ask the question, Annie, not me.
That's all right. It's fine. Do you allow alternatives to tasks in interviews, such as giving a presentation, for example? So we've got yes, no, not consistently, don't know, and not applicable.
Okay, and what would you say, Mairead, whilst people are answering, is why would we want to give alternatives for things like that?
I think we want to give alternatives because at the end of the day, we're looking for the best person, aren't we? And we're all individual and we perform in different ways. So if you're thinking of a live presentation, and we do presentations in some of our interviews, that's going to worry a lot of people. So why not let them record it if they want to and show it at the interview and then ask them questions? At least then they're not, you know, you're getting the best from that person. You're not watching them struggling and getting stressed with delivering the presentation rather than what they're trying to get across.
It's a really good point, because just being confident isn't necessarily related to the content that they're putting across, definitely. So how did that come out, Annie?
So we've got yes, excuse me, yes 22, no 21, not consistently 22, don't know 26, and 8% not applicable.
It's good to see there's quite a few people who are building that in, and I think yeah, where it's not consistently, that's interesting as well, because again, you're not going to necessarily be getting the best opportunity every time then, so something to think about. Great, okay, thank you. So just a quick sum up of the benefits of inclusive design in recruitment then, Mairead.
So firstly, if you have inclusive design in the recruitment process for everyone, if you think about 75% of people have a fear of public speaking, so offering an alternative representation can really help people shine. When people are really relaxed, you have a better chance of seeing their true strengths. You have less likely of people declining their interviewing or applying, so you get a wider talent pool. And you're giving, really, what's important is you're giving a strong message to all candidates via inclusive recruitment practices that they can expect a diverse and inclusive recruitment process, but also a working environment, which is important.
Definitely, people want that more and more, don't they, regardless of their personal situation. So let's have a quick look at the AbilityNet processes then, because you've done a lot on there and were awarded the Disability Confident Leader status last year, so that's exciting.
It was exciting, yes. So we're always reviewing our processes all the time, and we take a lot of feedback from interviewers themselves, not just HR, but line managers. We'll take it from applicants. We always ask for their feedback. We ask people internally, staff as well, about our processes, and we'll always develop all the time, really, if something's not working. It's important to use a clear step-by-step process. So telling them exactly what the process will be will help. Simple language. I think people forget about simple language. You know, you can use such corporate words these days. And somebody used something the other day in one of our own, actually. I think it was gravitas, and had to explain to that person that it's a very male term.
Yeah.
And a lot of women wouldn't refer to themselves having gravitas. So just thinking of the words you're using, even where you're advertising, you know, especially for us, we do look at disability job sites, people like Even Break, so look at that. And make it clear, we use something called Clear Talents in recruitment, and we offer them the opportunity to fill out a questionnaire about their strengths or where they feel that they need help with the recruitment process, and that's very confidential, and it shows to them that we have an inclusive practice, so that's important for us. And the reason why we were applied for the Disability and Confident Leader, really, which is level 3, is that, you know, we don't want to just talk the talk, we want to show that we are doing what we say we will do. And with that, it's quite a bit of form filling, and it does need to be assessed by an external person. But what it does make you do is, you do have to do a report each year, and it shows, you have to show clearly your stats and how you're improving and what you're implementing. So I think that's quite a key thing to have.
Definitely.
If I just move on to the next slide, just because we need to come to an end. So do think about altering an interview process for someone. As I say, we use experts, so we'll speak to somebody, Dyslexia Association, Autistic Association. We had somebody do a technical test for one of our technical roles, and even though for us it seemed quite straightforward, filling out a spreadsheet with your findings, that person came back to us and said, it's not logical to them what we're asking them to do. So after speaking to the Autistic Society, they said this is why, you know, they're not understanding this. Is it that they can do their own format? And so that's something we allowed, as long as we could assess it, then it didn't need to be in the format we were asking for, really. So we allowed that. And we do allow things like, we will give questions beforehand, and we will let people pre-record their presentations. And if we go on to, just go on to the final slide before we finish, I think this, some comments from internal staff really sums up how this can make a difference to people. So the first one is, Ability saw me as someone not with a disability, but someone with a gift for talking to people and with an interest in technology. And the second one is, this is my first full-time job, which because of my autism, I was unsure I could do. AbilityNet has given me the flexibility I need to be able to be in the 16% of adults with autism in full-time employment. AbilityNet has given me the opportunity to live an independent life, work in the way I need to, and on something I love doing. And really that just sums up inclusive recruitment to me.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Mairead. That's been really, really insightful and useful. Okay, so we're off to the fireside for a chat with Michael Vermeersch from Microsoft. So Michael, welcome. I'm really happy to be chatting to you today about inclusive recruitment processes at Microsoft. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And I have to say, I love a good fire.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so for my first question, and I know well from my interactions with Microsoft that inclusion is really central to your goals and how you work. But how does Microsoft communicate to potential candidates that you're an inclusive employer with an inclusive recruitment process?
Thank you. It's an interesting question, which has three parts almost to it. I mean, on the one hand, I would say passively through our careers page and the initiatives which surround that. So we do have a career page, which is microsoft.com/careers, and passively there is that you, when you will scroll for a job, you will see that there is a statement, you know, if you need assistance or reasonable adjustments due to a disability, we're mentioning that straight in there. And I think that's really key, to be open and transparent there during the application or the recruitment process. Here's a request that you can fill in via the form. And even further on in the whole job description, we provide resources. And amongst typical resources like interview tips and things like that, we also mention again accessibility support. So it is very clear and very prominent on the site and in the specific jobs each time. So that hopefully gives a bit that confidence to disabled talent that they are welcome. On the other hand, what we then also have, we do have our initiatives, which is around inclusive hiring. I'm going to say a link here, aka.ms/inclusive hiring. And there you will see things around a specific neurodiversity program, how we're doing that, how we supporting that. Some great information there as well. Say the other one, which will be mentioned there, is our supported employment, how we do that. And then specifically also focusing on disability hiring. Again, if you want to go straight in that direction, you can apply straight to that site, that link, and things like that. So on that sense, hopefully from a, let's say a little bit of a passive perspective, the elements are there to hopefully give you that confidence. But then, you know what, when the rubber hits the road, role models, you know, really key. And on that sense, again, I'm going to give you a link here, aka.ms/accessibility stories. And this is where you see stories of our disabled employees, their experience at work, but also on how they live, and how they thrive. And I think that's really key to have those stories there, which kind of like, whoa, I can be that person, right? I want to be that person. And this really shows that we value disabled talent. Obviously, where we can, we will share that we are proud to be part of the UK government's Disability Confidence Scheme, and we're really chuffed that we ultimately got to the leadership level, and that brings us responsibilities as well. I mean, it's great to be there, but it shows that we have a learning journey still to do, with sharing, communicating, but also being a role model. And with that comes learnings as well. So engaging with both disabled talent, but also employers who are on this roadmap, who are part of that, great initiative. Every so often, the employee resource group for employees with disabilities also get involved. I mean, not so long ago, we were asked to help support people for our store, and we could amplify ourselves, the employee resource group, those job openings, making sure that, disabled talent really saw that, we're there to support you, but also we would like to grow. So on that sense, so that I would say like aspect number 2. Finally, third aspect, I would say, and there's a number of examples there, but really proud on our annual support of the Global Purple Light Up campaign that we're doing, which is part of our public demonstration of support for people with disabilities. That's not, recruitment specific, but it does show that we care about this, that we value this, and ultimately we're there every year, together with supporting National Disability Employment Awareness Month, International Day for People with Disabilities. So again, hopefully that gives you enough enticement to apply.
Well, it certainly does. Going back to the beginning of the webinar, that sense of belonging is being communicated then by so many different angles. And I think you're absolutely right about the power of personal stories to evidence that the policies and processes that you're putting in place are leading to, the results and the diversity in the workforce, which is fantastic. So going on to my next question. So obviously you're a very large organisation, and so trying to make sure that processes are applied consistently across the organisation must be something of a challenge. What are the strategies that are in place to achieve that?
I love that question, and I've been very cheeky and naughty with that question. So I don't do recruitment, right? So please, whilst I love to have disabled talent, please don't send your CVs to me. So I brought that question to our global talent acquisition organization within our business. So there's a global part of the organization just dedicated for that. And I said, yeah, how do you? And it was just great that they came back with things like, yeah, you're right. That's how we do it. So their answer was, they got a consistent hiring process with guidelines for managers. So it is a partnership, right? They will do the talent acquisition, but then obviously they will partner with the hiring managers, which is kind of key, right? Because they ultimately will be, having those people in their team, right? So they make sure that those managers all had inclusive hiring training, and there's a disability toolkit, because not everybody knows everything, right? So the managers can consult that as well. And as such, we're providing a framework to make sure that disabled talent can really, show their best during the interview and the recruitment process. And on that sense, if I boil that down, it's basically even training, making sure that the training is there for the people doing the hiring, for the people supporting the hiring, and all that kind of stuff. And it's removing the barriers where the barriers are. There's nothing to be fixed with people with disabilities. Now, a great example here is that we can definitely share with you is, and again, I'm going to tell you a link here, aka.ms/accessibility@a-glance. There you will have all bite-sized videos, about 2 minutes, where you will learn about service animals, making virtual meetings accessible, how to create inclusive events, for example, inclusive hiring events, how to do captioning, how to train people, but also a variety of videos on interviewing candidates with disabilities. So how to do that in the best way possible. And ultimately, that gives you a consistent approach to requesting, making sure that those adjustments land for the recruitment process and employees. So hopefully, with all this in place, we make sure that we give our recruitment engine that really inclusive approach. And yes, of course, we're continuously learning, right?
Yeah, and that's that communication piece that Mairead was talking about. And I think you're absolutely right. It can be that when we bring people into our organisations, we train them on job-based stuff, and everyone's really well trained, but it can be that recruitment, especially as you say for hiring managers, can be a bit neglected. And if you don't put the knowledge in front of people and your bite-sized videos and things like that to create that aha buy-in moment to say, and now I know why it's important, and now I'm going to change my approach, is really, really key. So that sounds like that's working really well then. So the this is sort of linked to that actually, really, is you've got processes that people are asked to follow, but getting the why across to people is such an important ingredient in adoption of processes. So how do you articulate those benefits to internal teams?
So I'll be honest, I got quite some boilerplate perfect text for this. So where I can start, and then I'll go a bit more in authenticity. At Microsoft, we strive to be a diverse organization with an inclusive culture. But ultimately, it boils down to supporting our mission statement, and it's to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And in order to support that mission statement, this is a mission statement focused on every person, not 50% of the population, not 80% of the population, everybody. And for that sense, if we would start excluding disabled talent, but also start excluding connection, engagement with a disabled marketplace, that's just not our mission. Yeah. So therefore, we have to do this. And we see benefit from this, and we want to make sure that our customers get that capability as well. Now, on the other hand, what we also have is that we want this to be pervasive across our organization. We have this in our commitments. So every single person from our organization has a D&I commitment in their, in their what's it called? In their performance criteria and all that kind of stuff. So this shows that this is really key. I don't think there's not a single meeting that goes by without having a diversity and inclusion element in this, and making sure that we have those inclusive behaviors. So, and again, we know very well why that is there, because again, it's attached to our mission statement. And I'd like to also go back to, this has been a journey for us. Yeah. I'd like to go back to Satya Nadella, where, I could go back to his personal life. I could go back to his family. As you may know, he has a child with a disability. But ultimately, on the one hand, as a CEO, seeing that technology is really key, and technology can be the solution to remove barriers to exclusion. But ultimately, the way to go there is via empathy, and with empathy comes learning, because otherwise you can't actually exercise empathy. So on that sense, learning from you had to be part of that. So we kind of became an organization that, rather than being a know-it-all, we want to be a learn-it-all. And that in itself drives that curiosity to how do we connect? How do we become a better organization? And people start really yeah, getting engaged in this because they would like to be treated like this as well. So it almost becomes part of our DNA on this. Finally, we are also publishing our results, and that keeps us honest and keeps us driving as well. Very recently, we published our disability representation stats. More on this, you can do some of this yourself. We got aka.ms, another link coming up, aka.ms/accessibility fundamentals, where you can engage, you will find some training again for yourself, and you can get a badge on language, etiquette, tools, and creating accessible content. So, and this is how ultimately we see that this is key. And what it is changing and things like that. So I think that is what we almost seeing across our community.
Brilliant. And so, yeah, I mean, from the mission statement to the individual commitments, it's that red thread that runs through everything. And I think that's absolutely, when we talk to organizations, it's the degree to which people talk about and think about, and I love that expression, a learn it all, that have welcoming new information and concepts and thoughts is really key in making people feel like they have a role to play in it as well.
It invites representation, it invites, you know, a voice, being a voice, because otherwise how would you be able to learn, right?
Yeah. Makes sense. I'm going to be a learn it all. I like that. So my last question, and I'm sure you could give loads of tips to organisations on how to be more inclusive, but if you had to choose one piece of advice to give to people that's going to make the biggest difference, in your opinion, what would that be?
If you're doing this for time reasons, one piece of advice, I can't go further. If you're doing it for time reasons, hire a person with a disability. It will all flow around that. just if you just want, just do it. So did you do that for time reasons?
No.
Okay, phew. But yeah, I think it's really key to listen to your employees and listen to your employee resource group if you have one. If you're sizable enough to set one up, do that. And they will give you feedback on your experiences, on your processes. It will make you a better employer, both internally and externally, because you want your products to get and your services to get sold, right? Or to get consumed. So definitely do that. If you think you're not currently employing people with disabilities, think again. 70% of disabilities are invisible. So maybe you just needed to give them a voice, right? Do share, do connect with organizations such as AbilityNet, like we do, or the Business Disability Forum, or connect with other employers who are on the Disability Confident Roadmap. This is all about sharing, growing together. This is a journey, right? We've been at this journey for a while now. So
yeah,
we need each other.
Long way to go, yeah.
Absolutely. We have a roadmap there with a maturity model. If you want and interested in it, with examples and free IP, you can get that. Another link coming, aka.ms/accessibility journey. We're more than happy to talk to you about this and help you, but it will show you, first of all, starts with culture, starts with people. Shall I say it again? It starts with culture, starts with people. And then kind of building a vision on where you want to go, building a strategy to get that vision, then measure. If you don't measure it, you will not see how you're making progress. You can't tweak along that journey. Think of some investment, but it doesn't have to be money. It could also be, if you're doing things better on an inclusive way, you will recuperate money as well. I had this thing with a bank where they had accessible software from us. They weren't using it. And then I said, what happens when you got a mishap at your call center? And they say, oh, that has to be escalated. And then we have to do this and that. I said, you do know if you be using things in an accessible way, you would never have to escalate. You wouldn't have to need that team and all that kind of stuff. It was like a facepalm moment. It's like all the costs we could have saved over those years. You can repurpose that and being even better rather than having to set that aside for all mishaps that you could be having. So, you know, there's just check it out. I would say check out that maturity model, check out that roadmap, and we're all here to help each other, I think.
Definitely. Thank you, Michael. And Annie, have we got any questions in the Q&A for Michael or for Mairead?
Yeah, we've got lots of questions coming through. So yeah, thank you so much, Michael, Mairead.
That was fantastic, Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really great
useful
tips. Yeah, so we've got lots of questions that have already come through, but if you've got any more, do fire away in the Q&A window. I doubt we'll manage to cover all of the questions right now, but any unanswered questions we'll capture and we'll put them on our website on the webinar page that you'll be sent a link to on Thursday. So have a look there. So just having a look through the questions now. There's one that's come through from Corrine for all of you really, but maybe Mairead might have some experience of, would you have information or experience on the use of a personal assistant as reasonable accommodation, and also any information on job carving for autistic staff or staff with an intellectual disability?
So with regard of an experience, yes, our own staff have had help with a personal assistant, and it works really well. Somebody who has a visual impairment has a personal assistant, and that can be somebody external, it can be somebody internal. We've used both. At the moment we're using somebody internal, and that's all done through Access to Work, so there's no cost to us at all. So Access to Work for that is great, and they're very understanding as well. There's one of our employees wanted to use, and I can't remember what the software was called. There was this app he said he wanted to use alongside a personal assistant. So he's done half and half, and Access to Work, even though it was more costly, allowed for that. So I would definitely get, if you have got somebody with a disability who needs a personal assistant, to reach out to Access to Work. It works really well. Yeah.
Okay, and you sort of mentioned it earlier within the presentation, but a question about the tasks and presentations. If one of the essential criteria and one of the requirements of the role is to give presentations, do you think it's fine to insist people give a presentation at interview as the task?
Well, we would say no, because that's what we've done recently. Our accessibility consultants do have to give presentations, but the person who asked to have it recorded, we allowed for that, and she was successful and is such a key member of the accessibility team, and she does do presentations now. I think interviews, we all know, are very nerve-wracking, and it doesn't really show you at your full potential, you know. And people can be trained on presentation. They might be a bit rough around the edges, but it's something they can be trained on. So I don't think it's a key thing to have to do. I think it's just the norm, you know, particularly for certain, especially if it's more senior, it's a normal thing to do, but I don't think you have to do it, no.
Okay. A question for Michael. You may not know the answer to this immediately, but is it possible to know what percentage of Microsoft employees are disabled? And also, are there jobs set aside for people with disabilities, like, for example, a chat service provided by people with hearing disabilities?
So in the report I mentioned, the link was a little bit too difficult to say, so we can follow up with that. In the report I mentioned, we published some figures. I would hate to quote them now and be wrong. So definitely that report is there in public, so we can follow up with that if that's okay. With regards to roles, so we will not, I mean, typically when we do disability hiring, those are proper roles. We will not create roles for people with disabilities. So these are proper roles. We want people with disabilities to bring their full self, their full talent to what we do. So definitely, you know, I want to make sure that that is clear. Having said that, we have a service called the Disability Answer Desk and also the Enterprise Disability Answer Desk, which is a free service. The first one is to consumers, the other one to companies out there, a free service to help you with accessibility challenges on our platform. So if you have an issue with Windows, if you have an issue with Office that on an employee and you're disabled, we give you that free support. At the same time, also with third-party assistive technology, a range of them. If you have an issue on our platform, again, those two functions will help you. Now, those functions are more than likely going to be popular with people with disabilities, because they have, on that sense, we want to use their empathy. We want to use their lived experience to make sure that they give a better service. I wouldn't say this is only for people with disabilities, those job functions, but we do favor them in that role, because they can definitely then connect better to that community with disabilities.
Okay, thank you. I think we've just got time for one more question, and then we'll wrap up. There's a question here. Mairead, you touched upon this, but do you have any further examples about alternatives to what a presentation might include in the interview process?
Well, what we do if we don't do a presentation is we make sure that we have set questions related to the job itself, and everybody gets the same set of questions, and they're marked independently by the interviewers. So there's no crossing of what did you give this person, and then we analyze like that, and we only mark on the answers they give. So it's not about how they sound or their accent, it's about what the answers they give. So possibly with a presentation, if you didn't do a presentation, you could give them a written, you could give them the title and ask them to write a piece on it, a one-page piece on it. It's just like a presentation, they're just not standing up in front of you. So that's an alternative as well. Okay. I think it's important when we're looking at inclusive recruitment that we're not just looking, it's not just disabled people. Inclusive recruitment is across the piece. It's diversity, it's female, it's allowing flexible working. And, especially in tech, there's so few women in tech, that the Tech Talent Charter is looking at that we've joined up to. And we've made a real effort with our females within tech. And 35% of our workforce is working technical, and 50% of our technical team are women, and that's down to flexibility, allowing flexible jobs, that you don't have to work 9 to 5, you can work shorter hours, you can start earlier, you can finish earlier, you can do school hours, and that makes a huge difference. And I know you asked the question of Michael earlier, what's the one tip? And you said employ disabled people. And my tip would be flexible within your recruitment process, because then you'll get the best people. And when I look at over our turnover stats, and I'm just looking here, 2017, our turnover was 31.4% of staff. And last year it was 13%. So it just goes to show getting the right people and being flexible and having inclusive recruitment is really important.
Fantastic, and thank you. I think just looking at the time, we might have to end there. But thank you so much, Michael, Mairead and Amy. Some excellent pointers for you all to take away. There's some contact information there that we'll share as well on the link that you'll be sent. It will be on the follow-up page. So please do look back there, and also all of the links that Michael shared in the Fireside chat as well. So you can also find out some more about AbilityNet's workplace services at abilitynet.org.uk/workplace with some information about employee support, inclusive workplaces, bespoke training, gap analysis. We've got a helpline and free resources, and also a working from home review, which you can access at WFH-review. And then we do have some online training sessions on digital accessibility coming up this week on the 4th of March. We've got a session on how to produce accessible videos. followed by how to use a screen reader for accessibility testing on the 11th of March, and then the 17th of March, how to deliver and sustain accessible digital learning, and then the 18th of March, embedding accessibility at every stage of your project. And we're delighted to provide you with a discount code, so you can use AbilityNet Webinar 10 for any future bookings for 10% off as well. And then just finally, on the final slide, you can sign up to our AbilityNet newsletter at /newsletter. And then don't forget about our next free webinars at /webinars. Our next session is on Tuesday, the 16th of March, and that's we're joined by Caroline Casey of the Valuable 500 for our Accessibility Insights webinar. So hope you can join us for that. And thanks again to everyone that's spoken and joined us today. And we'll be in touch with you soon. And please do fill out the feedback form that will appear at the end of the webinar. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
everyone.
Have a good day.
Have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.